Apparently. Okay, so good morning. We're starting the new Perek Shishi, Bameh Isha, which is Daf Nun Zayin, and it discusses things that a woman is not allowed to wear when she goes out into the public domain. The reason why she can't wear these things, for the most part, as Rashi explains, most of the items that are going to be listed here in the Mishnah are things that are really considered a tachshit. They are considered to be an ornament, and therefore they're not really considered to be carrying on Shabbat. But the concern is that for one reason or another, these are items that could be removed and then carried by accident. Removed to be shown off, or removed because they are getting in the way, and will need to be, and then the woman might forget that it's Shabbat and might carry it. And that's what we're talking about here. So this is not like the previous parak where we talked about animals wearing things that are a burden, actually, and it says if the animal's carrying something for you. Here, the wearing itself is not considered carrying. The only concern is that these are items that could fall off or be removed and then carried, and that's why they weren't allowed to be worn outside. Now, there's a whole long literature and discussion in the commentaries, particularly in the Rishonim, of why the rules laid out in this parak were not really followed anymore. They kind of fell into disuse, and nowadays people are not even aware of them at all. And that's a discussion that will take us on a tangent, but the point is that it's interesting to note that in common practice today, even in places where there is no eruv, even in places where people do not carry, these restrictions are generally not observed and people are not aware of them. So it's interesting. But in any case, so what can a woman wear when she goes out, and what can she not wear when she goes out? So there were different kinds of things that a woman would braid into her hair, such as strings of wool, strings of linen, or ritzuot, different kinds of straps that they would put in order to braid up their hair. And these cannot be worn. And she also cannot go to the mikveh wearing such things unless she loosens them. So there are two halachot being taught to us here. One is that she can't go out with these things on Shabbat in her hair. And secondly, she cannot immerse in the mikveh wearing these things because they're considered to interpose between the water and her hair. We're going to see more about this as we go into the Gemara. There's a machloket rishonim here as to whether these strings are tied into her hair or simply sort of wrapped around her hair. The Shulchan Aruch has a lenient opinion and says that the only problem is when they're wrapped in her hair. But if they are tied firmly, in other words, they're tightly tied, that's not an issue. Velo betotefet, she cannot go out wearing a totefet, which should sound like a familiar word, totafot, right? The Gemara is at first going to propose another interpretation of this, but of course it means some kind of a forehead plate, just like totafot ben enecha, of tefillin.
Like a brooch?
No, it would go across her forehead. Like, haven't you ever seen one of those, like in the movies, the women they look very exotic, and they have across their forehead sort of a decorative jewelry that goes across the forehead. In the same place as tefillin. Velo b'sarvitin, and not with sarvitin. Sarvitin were things that hung down, actually. In other words, the woman would have a thing that went across her head and also things that hung down on her cheeks that also would not be allowed to be worn. Velo b'kavul, if they're not tied firmly onto her cap. Because remember, women, generally speaking, in the times of the Talmud, went out with their hair covered with some kind of a hairnet called the svacha. That they would go out, and they would always have this hairnet on, and so they would never take the hairnet off, of course, because they wouldn't show their hair in public. So they would have these things attached to this hairnet, either this headband type of Wonder Woman thing, or the cheek things hanging down. And both of these could either be loose or attached. If they're attached, we're not concerned that she's going to detach them. But if they're loose, we'd be concerned from the net, and the band also tied into it, could be tied into it. Could be or couldn't be. She can't wear a woolen cap. cap. That's another cap that they would wear under the hairnet. So they had a woolen cap and also a hairnet on top of it. To the Reshut HaRabim. Velo be'ir shel zahav. Ir shel zahav was something that looked like Yerushalayim. That was another type of this was the famous thing that Rabbi Akiva bought for his wife. It's a very famous story. A type of ornament also that they would wear. Velo be'ktala, and she can't wear a ktala, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly what that is. Velo benizamim, and she can't go out with rings, which could be referring to earrings or really or a nose ring as well. Velo b'taba'at shenaleh chotam, she can't go out with a ring that doesn't have a seal on it. Now, what that means to say, well, we're going to see why it mentions that it doesn't have a seal on it. Velo b'machat shenanikuva, she can't go out with a needle that doesn't have an eye, because a needle that doesn't have an eye is decorative. In other words, one of those decorative needles that they'll put on their shirt, or they'll put on it's supposed to be for an ornament only. It's not used for actual sewing. So obviously, if it were used for sewing, that wouldn't be a decorative at all. That she certainly wouldn't be able to wear it, because it wouldn't really be considered clothing then. It would just be considered carrying. But here we're talking even about a decorative needle, and even about a ring that isn't a signet ring, because signet ring for sure she wouldn't be able to use, but even even a regular ring she wouldn't be able to wear. And then it says, "V'im yatzat eina chayavet chatat," and that's the important point. That if she goes out wearing any of these things, they are considered clothing. They are considered ornaments. So she's not considered to be in violation of Shabbat for carrying. It's just that we're concerned that she will remove these items. As we know, ladies, they like to take off their ring and show the other person. They say show their ring, they show their jewelry. So the concern was that they would do that and then they would forget and they would walk carrying it in the public domain. As we're going to see as the Gemara develops this idea. But all of these items are specified because they're items that if she does wear them, they're not biblically a violation of Shabbat. Yes?
It's sort of off topic, but for men, gloves, it sounds like the same kind of thing.
That's another concern, yeah.
I know the Baba who said we don't wear gloves.
Yeah, there are some who don't wear gloves on Shabbat because of the same reason, because they remove it to shake hands and they're considered going to walk with them.
What about a hat? I mean, a hat can blow off.
That's true.
Anybody.
Right, but people generally don't take them off on purpose. So anything can blow off, but then it keeps up.
You chase it. What's a lacha?
You have to put it back on. You can't carry it.
So you chase it.
You get it and you put it back on.
You just put it back on.
Yeah, just put it back on.
So it's not carrying.
Yeah, you wouldn't be carrying. But there's no. But apparently, men are not accustomed to taking off their hats and showing it to their friends and having them try it on and stuff like that. So that's one of the. Yeah. So now the Gemara says, "Tevila man dikar shema." So in the Mishnah it said that the woman cannot go out with the woolen strings in her hair, with the linen strings in her hair, and it said that she can't go to the mikveh with these strings. So the Gemara asks, who's talking about going to the mikveh in this Mishnah? This is Masekhet Shabbat. We're talking about what you can wear to go out. We're not talking about going to the mikveh. So why is it talking about the mikveh here? Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak explains, Amar Rabba Bar Avua, in the name of Rabba Bar Avua, Ma ta'am kamar. It's explaining the reason. Ma ta'am lo tetzei isha b'chut tetzeh v'lo b'chut tepishtan. What is the reason why the woman can't go out wearing the woolen strings and wearing the linen strings? Mipnei shamru chachamim b'chol lo titbol b'hen ad shetirapem v'kevan de b'chol lo titbol b'hen ad shetirapem b'shabbat lo tetzeh. So what it's doing is explaining the reason that she can't, since even during the week, if she has these strings in her hair, she can't go to the mikveh because they're considered chatzitza. They're considered an interposition. So therefore, if she were to go to the mikveh, she would have to remove them. So because of that, that's why. In other words, the Mishnah is giving you a reason why. Why can't she go out with these strings? Because they're an interposition. And dilma mitramela tevila shel mitzvah v'sharyalahu va'atela atuyinu dalit amot b'rishut harabim. Maybe she's going to have to go to the mikveh on Shabbat. And since you have to remove these from your hair when you go to the mikveh on Shabbat, she's going to remove them. She's going to forget it Shabbat and carry them home, because rather than bother to put them back in her hair. So basically the rule is anything that's an adornment that you'd have to remove to go into the mikveh, and which you would walk out without. In other words, obviously clothes are not included because nobody would walk out without their clothes. But you might walk out without putting the strings back up in your hair. So we're concerned that she's going to have to remove these because she needs to go to the mikveh, and then she'll carry them. So that's
not everybody is considered chatzitza.
Not everything.
She can have like a scarf that is terapem.
That's right. Well, it's going to come to that. Right. A loose thing is different. but a tight thing, or these things that are in the hair, are going to be considered. So what the Mishnah is saying is, why does the Mishnah mention tevilah? Why does it mention going to the mikveh? Because it's explaining to you the reason. That the reason why you're not allowed to wear these things out on Shabbat is since they have to be loosened or removed when you go to the mikveh. Ba'amine Rav Kahana Merav. Rav Kahana asked Rav the following thing. Tiche Chalil Tamai. What about these loose, sort of, what they would make was sort of these hollow, loose tubes of string that would be hung up in the hair. But rather than be tightly bound in the hair, because they were hollow and they had more space inside, so they weren't tightly squeezed because that would crush them. They were lightly tied onto the hair. So the question is, can you wear these? Because these shouldn't be an interposition in the mikveh because they're not tied tightly enough. The water can easily get past them because they have bounce. They're not like a string that ties really tightly and doesn't allow anything through. So he says, Amar le arig ka'amrat. You're talking about a woven thing. Kol shehu arig lo gazru. Anything which is woven, the rabbis didn't make a gezerah because even for mikveh it's allowed. So for instance, in Israel, when women go to, we don't do this here in America, but when women go to convert, they have a special garment. They have like a special gown that they wear when they go into the mikveh. It's a loose gown inside the mikveh because they don't want to see the woman. So, but it's a.
Why the
rabbis have to see the girl go under.
Really?
Yeah. So the way that we do it is we put blankets on the bars of the mikveh because the mikveh has like bars, to go down. You've been there, the rail. Yeah, so we put towels so we can't see the woman. We can only see the hair on her head. And we have a mikveh lady there who makes sure that she immerses properly, lifts her feet off and all that. So we just see the head go down. But in Israel, the way that they do it is they have her wear a special gown and immerse in the gown. So the purpose of that is, again, because it's so loose, we're not concerned that the water can't get through the loose garment. If she's wearing a bathing suit or something, that's a different story.
I read in the internet, Baba Saleh, because the mikveh, always he had some kind of...
Something on.
Nobody saw him naked.
Right, as long as it's loose. It just has to be loose that the water can get through, that's all. Yeah, it's loose. Yeah. Okay, so now we say... Itmar Nami similarly stated, Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua said, the son of Rav Yoshua said the following: Kol shu arig lo gazru. Anything which is woven, the gezerah doesn't apply. Both gezerot, meaning it's not considered a chatzitza for mikveh. It's not considered an interposition because the water can easily penetrate, and it's also not something that you wouldn't be allowed to wear it on Shabbat, because since the rule is that anything that's a chatzitza is what you can't wear on Shabbat, so here, if it's not a chatzitza, she wouldn't have to remove it to go to the mikveh, so she's not going to bother, so it's okay. Tell that to the mikveh ladies of today. Ve'gad amrei, and some say, Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua, that Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua said the following: Chazina la'achvatai de la kefadan alayu. That I saw my sisters that lo kavdan alayu, that they were not particular about it. Meaning, he's not talking about the mikveh here. He means even when they would go to bathe, they would leave these in their hair. So what does that show you? It shows you, as Rashi says, that when they would go to wash, that if it's true that they would wear it to go into the shower or the bath, so certainly they would wear it to the mikveh. In other words, that means that the water can get past it. If they left it up in their hair, even when they went to go take a shower, that means that they weren't concerned that the water wouldn't get through.
So there's no chatzitza.
Right, it's not a chatzitza, but he's bringing it from the example of his sisters. So ma'ika ben hach lishana uven hach lishana. So why do you need two quotes? The first quote just said anything woven, we're not concerned. The second one said my sisters didn't take it out of their hair when they went to take a shower. So what is the why do you need both, or what's the difference between each? So ika benayu de tinifan. Lehach lishana da amar kol shu arig lo gazero aninami aruk, or lehach lishana da amrat mishum kapeda kevan de tinifan mikpad kafda alayhu. So he says like this, that the difference is dirtiness. In other words, according to the first view, anything which is woven, the water can get by, and all we care about is the halachic parameters of chatzitza. What are the halachic parameters of chatzitza? Can the water get through it? That's it. We don't care about your personal subjective taste. Can the water get past it? That's all we care about. The second version that says, I saw my sisters who didn't remove these sort of puffy woolen things out of their hair, because it would get through, right? But would they have removed it if they had been dirty? Of course they would have. If they had been dirty and had dirt on them, they would have removed it, because what's the point of taking a shower with something dirty in your hair? The dirt will just get mixed in your hair. So he says, according to the second lashon, according to the second basis, that the reason why we don't require these items to be removed from the hair is because of kupeda, because of the particularness of the woman, the particularity of the woman. So then we would say that if they're dirty, they would be a concern, because they're definitely going to take them out if they're dirty. So in other words, the first opinion is saying that as long as water gets through it, from a technical standpoint, it's not a chatzitza, so it's okay. The second version says, even if from a technical standpoint the water will get through, the fact remains that the woman will take this out of her hair because it's dirty. So we should be concerned that it's something which she's going to remove from her hair when she goes to the mikveh, and therefore shouldn't be allowed to wear in her hair on Shabbat. So if they're clean, she should be able to wear them on Shabbat out. But if they're not clean, she shouldn't be allowed to wear them out on Shabbat, because we know that she'll remove them when she goes to the mikveh, not because of a technical halachic reason that you have to remove them, because they're dirty and it's going to make it muddy and it's going to get in her hair. That's the reason. Okay, so that's the way the Gemara says. Now, Tanan Hatam we learned over there. This is talking about Masekhet Mikvaot when we talk about Chatzitzot. Ve'elu chotzitin badam. After it discusses the things that are considered a Chatzitza with regard to kelim. For example, you go to Tevilat Kelim, you go to immerse your new pots and pans in the mikveh. So if they have stickers on them, or anything else, you got to take them off. It's called chatzitza. So same thing with a person. You have a band-aid on, you have whatever, you have to take it off. Chatzitzot. So what is a chatzitza for a person? So chutei tzemer v'chutei pishan v'arutzot sheberoshei habanot. This is exactly what it says in our Mishnah. Right? Chutei tzemer, strings of wool. This is not talking about the puffy woven pieces that were in their hair that are not an interposition. But now we're talking about strings that are tied in the hair. Strings of linen tied in the hair, or ritzuot, straps that were tied into the hair.
Well, you can see that when the women and kids go to the Caribbean and they come back and their hair is braided, and they have these colored strings. They're beads. And there's strings that are woven into the braid.
Right.
And so
that's exactly what they're talking about. Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking about. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer shel tzemer shel se'ar en chotzitzin b'pnei shamayim bein ben. So Rabbi Yehuda says, when it comes to any kind of thing made of wool, which is softer than linen, or anything that's made of se'ar, of hair itself, that's not going to prevent water from getting through. He thinks that's sufficiently loose that the water will be able to penetrate. So Amar Ravuna said, "V'chulan b'rashei banot shaninu." All of these things are only in the hair. We're talking about things that they put in the hair. So Matzkif la Rav Yosef raised an objection. Why do you have to tell me that we're only talking about things in the hair? What's the novelty here? Are you telling me to exclude the neck? In other words, you're saying that these items, like the string of wool or the string of linen, whether in the hair, it's a problem, but when they're around the neck, it's not a problem. Is that what you're telling me? Wait a second. Which case? If you're talking about wool, if wool in the hair, wool being soft, pushed up against something coarser like hair, if that's not considered, in other words, human hair, if that's considered an interposition, then certainly when you have rach al gabe kashe chotzetz, then when you have wool strapped around your skin, it's definitely going to be an interposition because it'll push in. In other words, your hair is actually going to be more resistant than your neck skin. So if in your hair it's considered an interposition, it will definitely be considered an interposition around your neck. Rather, you'll tell me, maybe you're talking about linen. Similarly, if the coarse linen string is considered an interposition when it's in your hair, then certainly when it's around your neck, it's going to push into your skin, and it's going to be a chatzitza as well. So Ela Amar Rav Yosef, rather Rav Yosef says, this is what Rav Huna meant when he said that all of these rules only apply to hair. Why did he say that? Because when a woman ties something in her hair, she can tie it tightly. As I know, whenever I try to get this, those what do they call those things that you put up in your hair?
Barrettes.
Yeah, whatever they are out of my daughter's hair. Those things that they tie up there that you can't, you have to untangle them, and they're really tight, and if you pull the wrong way, it really hurts. I don't know. I haven't had the problem of having hair for quite a long time, but but anyway, a woman can put something very tight in her hair. She doesn't feel it. She doesn't have the ability. She would only feel it if you pulled her hair. But if something in her hair tied tightly, she doesn't feel it. Whereas around her neck, she's not going to strangle herself, right? So we're not concerned. Abai raised an objection. It says that the girls can go out with strings in their ears. Now, why would they do this? Nowadays, we have those training earrings. When girls get their ears pierced, they have to leave an earring in there in order that the whole knot close up. So they would have strings. They didn't have like training earrings like they have the cheap earrings that they can put in. They had strings, and they would also wear, like the girls, I guess the young girls would wear pretend necklaces, around their necks. So it says they can't go out. They can go out with the ones in their ears, but not the ones around their necks. Okay, so the question is, why can't they go out with the ones around their necks? So since you just told me that, and if you're telling me that a woman is not going to choke herself with these things, so why should it be that they can't go out with them, since we're assuming that they're not tied so tightly that they're going to be in interposition? They're not tied so tightly. So therefore she wouldn't have to remove them to go to the mikveh, for instance. So Amar Ravina says, as we turn to Amud Bet, Hacha b'ktala askinan, we're talking about a ktala here, which according to Rashi is talking about some kind of a bib that they would very tightly tie to their neck, around their neck. And actually they would purposely choke themselves with it. Ktala is like a choker, so it would choke them on purpose, so that because it means to kill, ktala. So they would do that on purpose, because actually by tying it tightly, their flesh would protrude, and it would make them look like they were a little bit wealthier than they actually were, because they would look a little fatter than they were. So they actually would tie it tightly on purpose around their necks. So that's a different story. The isha choneket adatzma, because there a woman does tie it tightly, because she wants to look like she has a little flesh on her bones. Okay? So basically that's a different story. So normally it's true. In other words, the general principle is that anything around the neck she's not going to choke herself with. So even if a woman were to have gone to the mikveh, and let's say afterwards she realized that she had a necklace on. So really, a necklace is not going to be an issue, because a necklace is not going to dig in to the skin, and it's not going to be choking it. Now, generally, we take everything off when we go to the mikveh anyway, but I'm just saying, in theory, it wouldn't be a problem. But here, when we're talking about something that really would be choked around the neck, like those African women that they have those really tight things around their neck that you sometimes see those pictures, right. That type of thing is going to be an issue. So you have to look at every case.
That sounds like what he's talking about.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. But he's talking about something that they had a bib, actually, that would catch food that fell, so that they wouldn't get dirty. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we said that Rabbi Yehuda is lenient when it comes to strings of wool and strings made of hair, because he says that the water will get under them. Linen, he agrees. Linen you have to remove if you're going to go to the mikveh. But hair, something made of hair or something made of wool, he's not concerned. Amar Rav Yosef says, Amar Rav Yehuda said that Amar Shmuel, that Shmuel said, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, the law follows Rabbi Yehuda, b'chutei se'ar, when it comes to strings of hair. In other words, what is he saying? Rav Yosef is reporting that Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said that when it comes to something made of hair, tied in the hair, we're not concerned that it's going to be an interposition.
Why? Because the water will
Because the water will get through it. Right, exactly. Amar le Abaye says, Halacha miklal de plige. You're implying that there's a machloket about this. Now remember, in the Mishnah itself, the Chachamim, the Tanna Kama never mentioned hair. He only mentioned wool, linen, and the straps, which I guess are made of skin of an animal, probably. Rabbi Yehuda said se'ar and chuti, and he said that se'ar and semer. He mentioned hair and wool. The first time I never mentioned hair. So how do you know that they even argue about that? Maybe you'll tell me that the only reason why Rabbi Yehuda brings up the case of hair is because the Tanna Kama must have meant to prohibit that as well. No, v'dilma kishem kamar lahu. But maybe Rabbi Yehuda is not saying that. Maybe he's saying kishem, just like you agree with me, because you didn't mention hair. tying hair into your hair, so to speak. You didn't mention it, so you must be permitting it. So and what he's saying to them is, just like you agree with me that if somebody were to tie strings of hair into their hair, that it would be okay, agree with me also about wool, which is just the hair of an animal. You should agree with me. Maybe that's what it means, that really everybody agrees about tying hair into your hair, that it's not tight enough to prevent the water from getting through. Itmar, it was stated, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, that Rav Nachman said, Shmuel says, Modim Chachamim Rabbi Yehuda b'chut tesar. That in fact that is the case. The Chachamim actually agree with Rabbi Yehuda that hair is not a problem. Which is actually a good thing, because think about it this way. If a woman were to go to the mikveh and she has hair, that loose hairs in her hair, that would be an interposition then.
Even if the place is a knot, it's not considered an interposition?
I mean, it might be it might be...
At the place of no.
Right, if it's really, really tight, I could see it being a concern. You're right. I mean, you would think it would matter just how tight it's tied. Yeah, I suppose there could be a variation of degree here.
Hold.
They shave off their heads.
Right.
Yeah.
They have a crew here.
Yeah. Tani Namiachi, similarly, it was taught chutei tzemer, chotzitzin, chutei se'ar, and chotzitzin. So it says in another braita, again, to drive home this point, that strings of tzemer, strings of wool, are chotzitzin. They're interpositions. Strings of hair are not. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shel tzemer v'shel se'ar, and chotzitzin, and Rabbi Yehuda says both of them are not. In other words, everybody agrees about the se'ar, about the hair. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, matnitin namidika. Our Mishnah supports this. The Katani, as it says, so it says that a woman can go out later in an upcoming Mishnah, not in our actual Mishnah, but they would oftentimes speak of the Mishnah of a whole perek as if it were one thing. So in the Mishnah, it's going to say that whether it's her hair or someone else's hair, she can go out with hair tied into her hair. Okay, Mani, who is represented in this Mishnah? If it's Rabbi Yehuda, then he would allow woolen strings too. So why does it only mention tying hair into hair? Rather, it must be the Rabbanan. And therefore, you see several proofs. Basically, they brought like 3 different proofs that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda that actually hair is not an interposition against hair. Only wool is an interposition according to the rabbis, and that's where there's a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. So, totefet, we said that totefet is something she cannot wear out. My totefet, what is totefet? Amar Rav Yosef, chomarta de katifta. What it means is that it's something that they would tie on that had some kind of bisamim or some kind of herbs or whatever it was to ward off ayin hara, to ward off bad things. Like a good luck charm or something that people would wear. So Amar le Abaye said, "V'tehevei kakameh mumche v'tishtereh." But according to that, it should be like a kameh. We know that you can wear an amulet on Shabbat, as we're going to learn later in the Masekhet. You can wear an amulet. So what's the difference? What you're saying is it's basically a type of amulet, but made with herbs and spices instead of with the words in a scroll. So rather, Ela Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmei Abaye. Rather, Rav Yehuda said the name of Abaye. Apuzainu. Apuzainu is a forehead plate. Okay? And that's what we said it was before. Tani Ram Yachi, we similarly learned in a Braita, Yota Isha Bisvacha Hamuzhevet. As it says, a woman can go out with a hairnet sort of thing that is gilded. In other words, it has gold and it's a fancy one. Ubitotefet. And with a forehead plate, ubesarvitin hakivuin ba, and with the bangles that hang down. So ezo totefet ve'ezo sarvitin. What's totefet and what's sarvitin? Amar Rabbi Abau said totefet hamukefet la meozen laozen. That means a plate that goes from ear to ear, right? It goes across her forehead. Sarvitin amagein la ad lehya, and sarvitin are the things that hang down over the cheeks. Amar Rav Huna says aniot osinotan shomine tiponin. The poor people would make this out of cloth. They would make a different colored cloth forehead band and sort of thing hanging over the cheeks. And the rich people, of course, ashirot osinotan shel kesef shel zahav, they would use gold and silver to make these ornaments rather than colored cloth. But the point is that the style was to put like a forehead band and to have things hanging down on the sides. And it says the woman cannot wear the kavul. So what's the kavul? Amar Rabbi Yanai says kavul is the I don't know what a kavul is. I kavla de avda, because there were 2 words. Kavul meant 2 different things. Woolly cap that was worn under the hairnet. Okay? Or it could also mean kavlad de'avda. It was a special type of an emblem that was worn by slaves. A servant would wear this to show who he belonged to, basically. So I kavlad de'avda tanan aval kippah shel tzemer shapir dameh odil ba kippah shel tzemer tanan v'koshken kavlad de'avda. Does it mean the special emblem of the servant? Is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about the woolly cap? If we're talking about the woolly cap, then certainly the emblem of the servant would not be allowed to be worn out. But if we're talking about the emblem of the servant, it could be that the woolly cap of the woman would be allowed. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Abahu says, it makes more sense that it's the kippah shel tzemer, that it's the woolly cap. Because, as we said, because it says, Tanan, kippah shel tzemer tanan. It makes more sense to say that it's talking about the woolly cap. V'tani Rami Achi, and similarly we learned in a Braita. Yotz'a isha b'kavul u'be'istama l'chatzer, because it says that the woman can go out with the kavul and the istama. We'll learn what the istama is later. But basically, what you see is that this is something that goes on the head together with that the woman goes out with it. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer af b'kavul l'shut rabim. We're going to see how we know that. And so Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says she can go out with the woolly cap into the rishut rabim. And how do we know that this thing is the woolly cap? How do we know it's not talking about a female servant wearing her badge that shows that she's a servant? How do we know it's a woolly cap? Because Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, because Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, Kol shu lemata min hasevacha yotzin bo, Kol shu lema'ala min hasevacha in yotzin bo, because he said the rule is that anything which is under the hairnet you can go out with. Anything that's over, any ornament over the hairnet, you can't go out with. So what's the ornament that's under the hairnet? He's saying the kavul is under the hairnet. So it could only be talking about the woolly cap. Because if it were talking about the badge of the servant, that would go on the shirt or somewhere else, or on the neck. It wouldn't go under the hairnet, obviously. So what we see is that they were talking about something that went under the hairnet.
And still might be taken off.
And still apparently might be slid out from under the hairnet and shown or something like that. Although originally we didn't want to assume that because it seemed unlikely. Apparently that is what they're talking about. But we're gonna review and revisit this issue later on in the Masechet, as we're going to see. So my istama, since we're on the topic, what is the istama? Rabbi Abahu said, bizyoneh. It means bizyoneh. But the problem is we don't know what that means either. So my bizyoneh, what does bizyoneh mean? Amar Rav, that Abaye said, that Rav said, kalya paruche. That what it means is that the woman who would have her hair up in these different kinds of hair nets or whatever, there would always be some hair that protruded in the back, and they would tie it again with yet another little thing in the back. So if you've ever seen, like, women will sometimes have a hat, and then they'll have something in the back also that catches the extra hair that falls behind. So the woman, this is the additional extra hairnet that would catch the hair that's paruche, that's protruding out from underneath her cap or her hairnet, and that's what they were discussing in the Mishnah, where where the Chachamim are saying that that she's allowed to wear it in the chatzer, she's allowed to wear it in the courtyard, but not into the public domain. Have a great day, everybody.